Hi, I'm Milas. I walked into the ER, soaked in rain and my daughter's blood, shaking so hard I thought my bones would crack. And when I called my mother, begging for help, she told me, "It's not our problem anymore." They left me there, alone, as my little girl fought for her life. But you know what's worse than being abandoned by your family while your child is dying? Discovering the betrayal didn't start that night. It started years ago, quietly, while they smiled in my face, and the only person who sat beside me that night was a stranger who whispered just one thing that changed everything. Before we dive in, what would you do if your family walked away when you needed them most? Let us know in the comments, because this is just the beginning. I could barely feel the rain hitting my face as I stumbled through the sliding doors of Boston General. All I could see was Narina's small hand dangling limply in mine, blood smeared down her arm, dripping onto the floor between our feet. The fluorescent lights above flickered, throwing pale shadows across the linoleum, making everything feel unreal, like I was watching someone else's nightmare. Ma'am, you need to let go." A nurse's voice broke through the static in my head as she tried to pry Narina from my arms. My breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale burning, each exhale shaking as I tried to explain. "A car hit us. She wasn't moving. Please, help her." My words tumbled over each other, catching on the dryness in my throat. They rushed her away on a gurney, and I took 2 steps after them before I froze, looking down at my hands, slick and red, trembling so badly I could barely keep them at my sides. The rain had washed some of it away, but blood had found every line of my skin, dried under my nails, sticking to my wrist where my watch should have been. I wiped my palms on my jeans, but it didn't come off. They told me to sit, so I sat, in a plastic chair that dug into my back, with the echo of Narina's small voice from this morning ringing in my ears. "Mommy, you're my hero." My phone buzzed in my pocket, cracked screen lighting up, and for a moment, hope sparked. I called Mom, hands shaking so much it took 3 tries to hit the right contact. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and tired. "What now, Milas?" "Mom, I need you here. Narina's hurt. They need a co-signer. I don't know what to do. Please." There was a pause, a small, hateful silence that cut deeper than her words. "It's not our problem anymore, Milas. You made your choices." "Mom, please." "I told you. You chose this life when you decided to play house with that man and got yourself stuck with a kid you couldn't afford. Don't call me again about your messes." The line went dead. I pulled the phone away, staring at the screen, my reflection fractured in the cracks. My teeth were chattering, but it wasn't cold. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. A doctor came over, eyes tired, mask hanging around his neck. "Ma'am, we need your consent for a procedure. There are complications, internal bleeding. We need to act now." Yes. Do whatever you need, please." He looked at me, pity flashing in his eyes. "Your insurance has a block due to unpaid balances. We need a family co-signer or we can't proceed." I signed what I could, hand jerking across the paper, the pen slipping in my bloody fingers. But it wasn't enough. They left me there, alone, to wait. I sat back down, pressing my palms together to stop them from shaking, blood flaking off onto my jeans. Around me, families huddled together, fathers rubbing their wives' backs, mothers holding sons. Quiet prayers whispered into each other's shoulders. Laughter broke out from a corner where a teenage boy, bandaged but alive, was being fussed over by a group of family. I looked down at my hands and felt a wave of nausea hit me so hard I nearly fell out of the chair. I saw my reflection again, this time in the vending machine across the hall, distorted but clear enough for me to see the fear in my eyes. "Mommy, you're my hero." Narina's words echoed in the hollow of my chest, mixing with the beep of the machines and the hum of the overhead lights. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand, face pinched with discomfort. "Ma'am, if you can't find a family member, we can't proceed. I'm sorry." Sorry. The word felt like a slap, so casual, so final. I opened my mouth to argue, to beg, but nothing came out except a whisper that cracked through my dry lips. "Please, someone, help." The nurse turned away, her shoes squeaking on the floor, leaving me there, staring at my hands, wondering how much of this was Narina's blood, how much of it was mine. I kept my head down, hands pressed together, blood dried and stiff between my fingers as I sat on that hard chair in the ER lobby. I could hear the rain tapping against the windows, people moving around me, voices rising and falling, but none of it felt real. I was there, but I wasn't. The world had moved on while I was frozen, waiting for a miracle. Then a calm voice broke through the hum of fluorescent lights and the murmurs of families comforting each other. "You look like you could use someone on your side." I lifted my head, unsure if I'd imagined it. Standing there was a woman, maybe in her 50s, with blonde hair tied back neatly, wearing a black coat that looked expensive in that quiet, unshowy way that said she never needed to prove her worth. She sat down beside me like she belonged there, like she had every right to take that empty seat next to a stranger. "I'm Rowena Sterling," she said, her voice warm, like the way a fireplace feels on your back in the dead of winter. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief, pressing it gently into my trembling hands. "You're not alone anymore." I wanted to tell her I didn't need charity, that I could handle this, that I wasn't some lost cause waiting for rescue. But my throat tightened, and the words stuck, bitter at the back of my tongue. I could only nod, clutching that handkerchief as if it were a lifeline, the softness of it so out of place against the crusted blood on my hands. Rowena didn't say anything more. She just sat there, her presence quiet but solid, letting me have this moment without asking me to explain or justify my pain. Hours slipped by in that waiting room. The TV overhead played the news on low volume, the voices of anchors reporting on traffic and rain flooding side streets. My phone lay in my lap, cracked screen lighting up with one notification after another until I forced myself to look. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, dozens of them. First, it was my brother, Liam, his voice sharp and disgusted. "I heard you're begging strangers for money now, Malis. Pathetic. Don't drag the family down with your mess." Then my mother's voice, colder than the rain. "If you can't handle being a mother, maybe you shouldn't have tried to play house. We'll take Narina away if we have to." They didn't even ask if Narina was okay, if she was alive, if she was scared. I felt heat rush to my face, shame and anger crashing together until I had to stand, pacing a few steps before sinking back into the chair, gripping the handkerchief so hard it wrinkled in my fist. I wanted to call them back, to scream that I wasn't the failure they made me out to be, that I was here, fighting for my daughter while they were home, cozy and dry, judging me for doing what I had to do to keep Narina alive. But I didn't call, because I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already decided who I was in their minds. I pressed the handkerchief to my eyes, letting it catch the tears I'd promised myself I wouldn't shed in this hospital, in front of strangers. It smelled faintly of lavender, and I remembered the softness in Rowena's eyes when she handed it to me. It was strange, how a stranger's kindness could feel warmer than the family who should have been here. I sank back into the chair, clutching that small piece of comfort, whispering under my breath, "I'm not weak, I'm not." Time dragged on, measured by the ticking clock on the wall and the rhythm of footsteps across the tiles. Nurses moved in and out of the sliding doors, calling names, families rising and falling back into their seats as they were summoned. Then a nurse I hadn't seen before approached, her face soft but tense, as if she was afraid to say the wrong thing. "Ma'am," she began, and I braced myself for more bad news. "There's someone here asking to cover your daughter's surgery costs." I blinked, the words not sinking in at first. "What?" She repeated it, slower this time, her eyes kind. "There's someone here who wants to cover your daughter's surgery." My breath caught in my throat, the world narrowing down to that one impossible sentence. My voice came out in a whisper, fragile but alive. Who would do that for me? The words hung in the air, heavy, almost too big to fit in that waiting room. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like everything was pressing down on me, the smell of antiseptic and rain-soaked coats, the quiet hum of machines behind closed doors. My eyes darted around, looking for who could have possibly said they would help us, and that's when I saw her again. Rowena stood there, the same calm on her face, her eyes steady as she took a step closer. She didn't wave or call out, just extended her hand, palm up, like she was giving me the choice to take it or walk away. "I can help you and your daughter," she said softly, her voice cutting through the chaos in my head. I hesitated, clutching the handkerchief she'd given me earlier, still damp from tears. I shook my head before I could even think. "I can't. I don't take handouts," I mumbled, trying to sound stronger than I felt, but my voice came out thin, almost embarrassed. She pulled her hand back, nodding slowly, as if she understood, like she had once said those same words herself. "It's not charity, Malis," she replied, her tone measured. "It's something I wish someone had done for me when I was sitting in a hospital alone." Something in me cracked, just a hairline fracture, but I felt it. I glanced back at the hallway where they had taken Narina, my mind picturing her small face, the way she had looked at me that morning with her gap-toothed smile, calling me her hero. Rowena motioned for me to sit, and she lowered herself into the chair next to me, taking a slow breath. "Years ago, I lost my husband. It was cancer, and the hospital felt like a maze with no way out. I had money, but it didn't matter when I was sitting there, alone, listening to the beeping of machines and the footsteps of nurses who never met your eyes." Her voice didn't shake, but there was something raw there and it made me pause. She looked me straight in the eye. "Money can't buy time, Malis, but it can buy a chance." I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she said. She pulled a small business card from her coat pocket and placed it in my hand, closing my fingers around it. "Come with me." She led me down a hallway to a small office with beige walls and a cluttered desk. A nurse was already there, waiting with a stack of forms. My hands shook as I took the pen, staring at the paperwork that would allow Narina's surgery to move forward. Rowena stood next to me, quietly signing her name as guarantor. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely there as I signed the last page. "I don't want to be a burden." Rowena placed a hand on my shoulder, warm and steady. "You're not. This is your fight, Malis. I'm just giving you a moment to catch your breath." When we stepped back into the waiting area, I felt lighter, like a crushing weight had been lifted off my chest, even if just for a moment. But the moment was short-lived. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see another voicemail from my mother. I stared at it for a long moment before pressing play, pressing the speaker to my ear. "If you take money from strangers, don't expect to ever come back to this family." Her voice snapped, cold and clipped. "Don't expect us to clean up your mess." I felt my jaw clench, teeth grinding, as I lowered the phone, my hands trembling again for a different reason. The hurt was there, but so was something else. A heat rising in my chest, a realization that maybe I didn't need them to come back to. Rowena sat beside me again, silent for a while before she finally spoke. "They will never understand, Malis, but your daughter will." I turned to look at her, searching her eyes, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "What do you really want from me?" Rowena didn't flinch when I asked her what she really wanted from me. She just held my gaze, steady, like she wasn't afraid of my desperation or the sharp edge in my voice. "I want you to promise me you won't give up, on yourself or on your daughter." Her words felt like a gust of cold air, pulling me upright. I expected her to mention interest rates, contracts, some hidden price that would hang over me for the rest of my life. Instead, she asked me for something I hadn't considered in a long time: dignity. "I don't know if I can promise that," I said, voice cracking. "I've spent so much time just trying to keep us alive." She didn't soften her tone, just nodded once. "Then promise you'll try." I pressed the handkerchief she had given me to my lips, tasting the salt of my tears that had soaked into the fabric. I thought about my mother's voice on the voicemail, cold as winter rain. If you take money from strangers, don't expect to ever come back to this family. I had spent years swallowing my words, sacrificing everything to keep the peace, trying to earn scraps of affection that never came. The hallway felt endless as I made my way back to the waiting area, the hospital lights buzzing overhead. I glanced at my phone, the screen cracked but still lighting up with notifications. My brother's name flashed across the screen, and before I could think better of it, I swiped to listen. Miles, Mom is calling Child Protective Services. She says you're unfit, that you can't take care of Narina. My knees buckled, and I sank into a chair, the air leaving my lungs in a rush. The world tilted, the smell of antiseptic and coffee from a nearby vending machine suddenly too much. I clutched the handkerchief, trying to ground myself, but the words kept echoing in my head. Unfit, unfit, unfit. I don't even remember walking to the chapel, but somehow I ended up there, sinking into a wooden pew as the weight of the world pressed down on me. It was quiet, the only light coming from a small stained glass window that made the shadows dance on the walls. I stared at the tiny flicker of a candle near the front, trying to find something to hold on to. That's where Rowena found me, her steps soft against the cold tile floor. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me, folding her hands in her lap, letting the silence wrap around us. They will try to take everything from you, Miles, she said quietly, her voice steady. Your peace, your child, your sense of worth. But only if you let them. I turned to her, my eyes burning. They're all I have left. No, she corrected me gently. Your daughter is what you have left, and she's worth fighting for. She offered to help, mentioning lawyers and support if it came to that, but her eyes told me the truth. She couldn't fight for me if I wouldn't fight for myself. I've spent my life begging for their approval, I whispered, the words tasting bitter as they left my tongue. And for what? To be called unfit? To be threatened while I'm trying to keep my child alive? Rowena reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek, and I didn't pull away. You're not unfit, Miles. You're surviving. There's a difference. A part of me that had been silent for so long finally stirred. I realized that fighting for Narina was fighting for me too. For the piece of myself I had given up every time I let them silence me. I clenched the handkerchief in my fist, feeling its softness and the quiet strength it represented. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I stood up. They won't take her from me. As I stepped out of the chapel, the hallway felt colder, the air tighter, and I saw her, my mother, Isolde, standing near the ER entrance, her arms crossed, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. Her gaze was sharp, judgmental, and she tilted her chin as if daring me to speak. Mom, what are you doing here? The rain had stopped, but the cold air still clung to the morning as light seeped through the hospital's glass doors. I stood there, breathing in the dampness, the sharpness of it cutting through the fear rising in my chest as I looked at my mother standing in the entryway. Mom, what are you doing here? I tried to steady my voice, but it wavered, too raw after everything. She didn't answer immediately, just ran her eyes over me, pausing on the dried blood on my shirt, the lines of exhaustion on my face. She lifted her chin, her raincoat perfectly dry, her makeup flawless even at this hour. She always did know how to look composed, even when everything around her was falling apart. You've embarrassed us enough, Miles. Her words were sharp, slicing through the thin hope I had left. Give Narina to me. You're not fit to be her mother. For a moment, the world went silent. The hum of the sliding doors, the distant calls from nurses down the corridor, everything fell away. I felt my fingers tighten around my phone, nails digging into my palm. You can't take her from me, I managed, forcing the words past the knot in my throat. She shook her head, like I was a child refusing to share a toy. You're living in a fantasy, Miles. You're broke, unstable, and now you're taking charity from strangers, embarrassing the family in front of the whole community. I wanted to scream, to tell her she didn't know a damn thing about what I was fighting for, but the words caught in my chest. She stepped closer, lowering her voice, but it was no less cruel. You can either sign her over willingly and save yourself the disgrace, or let the courts rip her away. We've already spoken to a lawyer. That's when I saw him. My brother, standing a few steps behind her, holding a folder in his hands, his eyes darting away when I looked at him. "Darren?" My voice cracked, disbelief mixing with the sting of betrayal. "You're a part of this?" He didn't answer, just tightened his grip on the folder. The same hands that used to lift Narina onto his shoulders during summer cookouts were now gripping the paperwork meant to take her from me. I felt the betrayal sink in, a slow burn that spread from my chest to the tips of my fingers. Every birthday I worked overtime to pay for, every holiday I spent scraping together enough to keep the lights on while they smiled over turkey dinners I cooked for them, every time I bit my tongue to keep the peace, it all came flooding back, sour and heavy. This wasn't about Narina's safety. It was about control, image, and the money they thought they deserved. "They're not taking her," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. My mother let out a cold laugh, like she was tired of playing nice. "You've always been stubborn, Milas, always thinking you know better, but you're alone in this." I almost believed her. I almost let the fear crawl back into my bones, but I remembered Rowena's words from the chapel, her voice steady and calm. "They can only take what you give them. Not this time." I turned away, ignoring the calls of my mother behind me, ignoring the way Darren tried to step forward, saying my name like it meant something. I walked quickly back through the hospital corridors, past the tired nurses, past the families huddled together with coffee cups and whispers of hope. I pushed open the door to Narina's room, the soft beep of the monitor greeting me, the quiet rhythm of her breathing stronger than any threat my family could throw at me. I took her small hand in mine, pressing it to my cheek as tears finally came. She stirred a little but didn't wake, her eyelids fluttering as she drifted in her dreams. "No one will take you from me," I whispered, letting the promise sink into the air between us. I pulled out my phone, wiping the tears from my face, and turned on the camera. The screen lit up, reflecting the determination in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years. It's time to show them who I really am. I pressed the record button, watching the red dot blink on the screen as if it were the only pulse I could count on in this mess. The soft hum of the machines around Narina filled the silence as I angled the camera toward my face. My reflection was raw, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, streaks of tear lines dried across my cheeks, hair clinging to my temples. But there was something steady in my gaze I hadn't seen in a long time. "My name is Milas Ridge. I'm a mother, and I'm fighting for my daughter." My voice cracked but didn't falter. I took a breath, letting the air fill the hollow fear in my chest before speaking again. "My family thinks they can take her from me because they think I'm weak. They've called me worthless, irresponsible, a burden. They've threatened to use the system to tear us apart, to claim I'm unfit while they stand in their clean kitchens and sip coffee, pretending they care." I paused, glancing at Narina's small frame in the hospital bed, the rise and fall of her chest anchoring me. But I'm done letting them control this story. When the recording stopped, I sat back, clutching the phone to my chest, letting the weight of my words settle. The morning light was filtering through the blinds, mixing with the cold rain still tapping against the window. I opened my voicemail, replaying the messages from my mother and Darren. Their words felt like poison, the cold certainty in my mother's voice when she said, "You brought this on yourself, Milas." The disgust in Darren's voice as he accused me of humiliating the family. My thumb hovered, then I hit save and forwarded each voicemail to a secure folder I had just set up, one Rowena told me to create when she dropped off coffee yesterday. Sliding my phone into my pocket, I kissed Narina's forehead before stepping out, the hallway lights flickering above as I made my way to the cafeteria downstairs. The scent of stale coffee and reheated soup hit me as I found a corner table away from the morning rush of nurses and visitors. I pulled out my phone, found the video, and sent it to a friend I trusted, along with the voicemails and screenshots of every message they had sent me. The message I typed was short: "If anything happens, you know the truth." Sending it felt like taking off a heavy coat I'd been wearing for years. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the hum of conversation and clatter of trays fade. Memories floated up, unbidden. My mother scolding me for getting pregnant, calling me a disappointment while I worked double shifts to pay bills. Darren laughing as he took the last piece of pie at Thanksgiving, reminding me I owed him for helping with rent one month, as if that made him a saint. They never saw the nights I cried on the floor of my tiny kitchen, scraping coins together for gas money. They never saw the mornings Narina and I sat on the bus, her tiny hand in mine, whispering to me that I was her hero, and here I was, fighting to remain that hero, even if it meant facing them head-on. I felt a presence before I saw her. Rowena slid into the seat across from me, setting a cup of coffee in front of me without a word. Her eyes were steady, calm, a quiet strength that settled the shaking in my hands. "They will come after you harder now," she said, stirring her tea without looking up. I nodded, fingers wrapped around the warm cup. "I know. Are you ready?" I hesitated, letting the fear pass through me before speaking. "I have to be." She reached into her purse, pulling out a folded piece of paper and sliding it across to me. "This is the legal aid's number. Call them as soon as you get upstairs." I tucked the paper into my pocket, whispering a thank you. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the distant call of an intercom and the steady patter of rain outside. I reached into my bag and pulled out the white handkerchief she had given me in the ER. It was wrinkled now, tear-stained, but holding it grounded me, a reminder that someone was in my corner. "You're not alone anymore." I echoed her words from that night, letting them sink in again. Rowena placed her hand over mine, squeezing gently before standing. "Remember that when they try to make you feel small." I watched her walk away, taking a deep breath before rising, moving through the halls back to Narina's room. I checked my phone one last time before slipping it into my pocket. That's when the notification came through, the vibration in my hand sharp and immediate. Emergency custody hearing filed, Isolde Ridge versus Malus Ridge. My vision blurred for a second, but I blinked it away, steadying myself against the wall. I looked through the window at Narina, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the battle waiting outside these hospital walls. "It's happening," I whispered. That thought was all I could cling to as I stood outside the Boston family court, clutching the folder Rowena handed me that morning. The gray clouds hung low, pressing down with the kind of weight that made you feel like the world wanted you to fail before you even stepped through the doors. Rowena was next to me, calm, her eyes scanning the building as if she had been in this fight 1,000 times. She didn't say much, just squeezed my arm once before we moved toward the entrance, the automatic doors sliding open with a hiss that matched the nervous breath I exhaled. Inside, the cold air smelled of paper and old coffee. We found our seats in the small courtroom, the benches hard, the lights too bright for how exhausted I felt. I glanced across the aisle, and there she was, my mother, Isolde, sitting in a navy coat, her hair pulled tight, a look of superiority fixed on her face like she was about to collect an award for her cruelty. Darren was behind her, flipping through papers, smirking when his eyes met mine, like he knew something I didn't. I was done being quiet. The judge entered, and everyone stood. I forced my knees to lock, my spine straight, even though it felt like my legs could give out any second. We sat, and the proceedings began. Isolde's lawyer started with that practiced, patronizing tone. He painted me as unstable, financially irresponsible, a danger to my own child. He brought up the hospital bills, the unknown benefactor who paid for the surgery, the fact that I lived in a small apartment in Dorchester, working 2 part-time jobs that couldn't possibly provide a stable environment for a child recovering from trauma. I clenched my hands in my lap, nails biting into my palms to keep from shouting. I could feel Rowena's gaze on me, reminding me to hold steady. And then, my mother spoke. She told the judge I was a good-hearted girl who got in over her head, that she didn't want to do this, but that she had no choice because I was endangering Narina. She lied, tears in her eyes, saying she only wanted what was best for her granddaughter, that she had tried to help me, but I refused. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her out, to expose every fake tear rolling down her powdered cheek. Instead, when the judge turned to me, I stood, my legs trembling, but my voice clear. "I have evidence," I said, pulling out my phone. The judge allowed me to play it, and the courtroom fell silent as my mother's voice filled the room. "If you take money from strangers, don't expect to ever come back to this family." I played Darren's message too, his voice dripping with disdain as he told me I was an embarrassment and that Mom's going to fix this mess you made. When the recording stopped, I looked at the judge, then at my mother, whose face had gone pale, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. Rowena stood next to me, addressing the court calmly. She explained she offered financial assistance with no expectation of repayment, that I hadn't asked her, that I had been focused solely on saving my daughter's life, not on charity or handouts. "She is not a liability," Rowena said. "She is a mother who stood alone when no one else would stand with her." I saw Darren shift uncomfortably, his smirk gone. Isolde's composure cracked, her voice rising as she yelled across the courtroom, "You were always a burden, Melis, always needing help, always dragging us down." The judge banged the gavel once for silence. I took a breath, meeting my mother's glare, and spoke softly but firmly. "You can call me a burden all you want," I said, my voice shaking only slightly, "but you will not call me a bad mother." There was a hush, a heavy pause that seemed to last forever before the judge cleared his throat and announced a recess, saying the case was not as clear-cut as presented and that further review would be necessary before any decision could be made. I walked out into the hallway, the air heavy but somehow easier to breathe than it had been in years. My hands were still shaking, but for once it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline, from finally standing up for myself. Rowena stepped beside me, leaning in with that calm strength she always carried. "Are you ready for what comes next?" she asked. I met her eyes, the fear still there but no longer in control, and I nodded. "Whatever it takes." I held that thought like a lifeline, repeating it in my mind as Rowena and I stepped back into the courtroom. The hallway outside was stuffy, carrying whispers of other families fighting private wars behind closed doors. But it was quiet inside, a dangerous sort of quiet, as the judge returned and the air seemed to tighten around us. Rowena didn't speak, but her hand brushed against my arm, steadying me as I forced myself to walk forward. My mother was already seated, her lawyer beside her, and Darren was standing close, arms crossed, that self-satisfied grin on his face. It was the look he wore when we were kids, the look he'd give me right before tattling to Mom, knowing she'd believe every word he said. This time, I didn't look away. Isolde's lawyer stood first, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, new evidence has come to light." His voice was smooth, rehearsed, but the words he dropped felt like punches. "We have located a document signed by Ms. Ridge years ago, naming her brother as temporary guardian of Narina during a period when Ms. Ridge was hospitalized for exhaustion." They slid the paper across to the judge, and I felt the floor shift under me, the world tilting. I remembered that day, the way I had signed so quickly, terrified because Narina was a newborn, and I couldn't even stand up without feeling like I would collapse. I had trusted them, trusted that they would help, not twist it into a weapon years later. My eyes burned, but I blinked, refusing to let the tears fall now. "They claim this shows a history of instability, Your Honor," the lawyer continued. "We request immediate transfer of custody to the maternal grandmother Isolde for the child's safety." Narina. My Narina. A buzzing filled my ears as fear rose, but then I felt Rowena's hand slide something into mine under the table. A slim folder, heavy in its promise. I glanced down, meeting her calm gaze as she mouthed silently, "Use it." Taking a breath, I stood, my legs unsteady but my resolve hardening with every heartbeat. "Your Honor, I have evidence I would like to submit." The judge nodded and I stepped forward, placing the folder in front of him with hands that only trembled once. Inside were bank statements, payment logs, receipts, proof of how, for years, every dollar I sent home for help with bills while I worked double shifts had ended up funding Darren's weekend getaways and my mother's spa appointments. Proof that they used Narina, while calling me ungrateful, while telling me I was a burden. I lifted my eyes, meeting my mother's, and saw the fury there, the disbelief that I had dared to fight back. "This is what they do," I said, my voice louder than I thought it could be, echoing across the courtroom. "They don't help, they take. They shame you for asking, then steal from you while telling you it's for your own good." My mother shot up, her chair screeching across the floor. "You ungrateful girl," she shouted, her face red, her hands shaking. "After everything we've done for you, all you've done for me?" My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. "You mean taking every paycheck I sent, every hour I worked, every piece of myself I gave up trying to make you proud? You call me a burden, but you've been living off of me while calling me a failure." The judge banged his gavel, demanding silence, but my mother kept yelling, Darren trying to calm her while hissing under his breath for her to keep it together. For the first time, I saw them flounder, scrambling to keep the masks in place, and I stood there, breathing hard, but standing. The judge cleared his throat, removing his glasses. "Given these new financial documents, this case will require a full investigation into potential misconduct regarding child support and guardianship responsibilities." I closed my eyes, the words washing over me, the tension in my shoulders loosening as the judge continued. "Pending the investigation, Narina will remain in her mother's custody." The courtroom fell into a hush. My mother sank back into her chair, face pale, and Darren was whispering furiously, but I didn't hear them anymore. I was already turning, Rowena beside me, guiding me out into the hall where the stale air felt fresh, where every breath felt like freedom. We stepped outside into the cold Boston evening, the clouds parting just enough for a sliver of light to break through. I pulled out the wrinkled white handkerchief from my pocket, gripping it tight. Rowena's hand came to rest on my shoulder, her voice soft but strong. "Are you okay?" I looked at her, then out into the street, the city lights blurry through the tears I finally let fall. "We're free," I whispered. "For now." That thought pressed against my ribs as Narina and I stepped out of the courthouse, the cold air biting at our cheeks. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, holding tighter than she ever had, as if she understood that something big had shifted. The sky was heavy with clouds, but I swore I saw a patch of blue pushing through, just enough to remind me what hope looked like. We walked the few blocks home, our steps slow. Each one felt like a declaration. We were still here. We were still standing. A week later, we were back at Boston General, but this time, it wasn't with blood on my hands or fear choking my lungs. It was a follow-up for Narina, and she chattered as we walked down those two bright halls, her small hand warm in mine. We passed the vending machine near the waiting room, the one that once reflected back a woman with blood under her fingernails and panic in her eyes. Now I paused, catching my reflection. I saw someone tired, someone who still carried dark circles under her eyes, but I also saw someone who wasn't afraid anymore. I saw someone who had fought and would keep fighting. I saw a mother. Narina's doctor cleared her to return to normal activities, and she squealed, hugging me so tightly that I almost fell backward. We laughed, and the sound echoed in the sterile room, pushing away ghosts that used to linger in every corner. Later that day, we went to the park. The air was sharp, the kind that turned your cheeks pink, but Narina didn't care. She threw herself into the swings, kicking her legs toward the sky, screaming with laughter. I sat on a nearby bench, coffee in hand, letting the warmth seep into my fingers, reminding me I was alive. Rowena appeared beside me without a word, sitting down with a small nod. We didn't need to speak as we watched Narina soar. After a moment, Rowena glanced at me and said softly, "You did this?" I felt tears sting my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I just nodded, letting the truth of her words settle into my bones. That night, as I was folding laundry in our small living room, my phone buzzed. Isolde's name flashed on the screen. I almost ignored it, but something in me needed to hear what she had to say. I answered. Her voice was sharp, filled with venom. "You ruined this family, Melis. You embarrassed us, dragged us into court, made us look like fools." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "No," I said quietly, firmly. "You did." I ended the call and, with hands that didn't tremble, blocked her number. A quiet finality settled into the room, a weight lifting from the air. Days passed, and the court's investigation into my mother and Darren continued, their misuse of the funds I sent back for help, now exposed. I wasn't naive enough to think justice was simple or swift, but for once, the truth was out there, and it wasn't just me holding it alone. That evening, Narina and I shared dinner at our small kitchen table, the hum of the city outside our window. She swung her legs as she ate, her smile bright as she told me about a story she wanted to write for school. After dishes were done, I lit a small candle on the shelf, placing Rowena's now clean handkerchief next to it. It wasn't just a handkerchief anymore. It was a reminder of survival, of a stranger's kindness that had pulled me back to my feet. I looked around our apartment, the same peeling paint, the same creaky floors, the same second-hand furniture, but it felt different now. It wasn't a cage anymore. It was a place where we were rebuilding, a place where laughter could echo without fear. As I tucked Narina into bed, she looked up at me, her eyes big in the dim light. "Mommy, are we safe now?" I smoothed her hair back, pressing a kiss to her forehead, letting the moment settle into the quiet. "We are safe," I whispered, "and tomorrow we start living."